again, we made a little change on the fly here. We're going to proceed with the next subsession of the panel. There will be capacity building and educational partnerships. So hold your questions for Dr. Kingham and Dr. Nulovu. So the next speaker will be Ashil Manirakiza, who's a clinical and radiation oncologist at the Rwanda Military Hospital.
Hi, good afternoon. I'll keep my presentation very short. Aware that the attention span has gone really down already. So I come from the country displayed up there. It's Rwanda. I was born a little south in Burundi. Oncology is really nascent in that country. It started about 7 years ago now. And the work of the partners in health represented here, and I won't dive much into it because Dr. Cyprien has already done a lot of work and a great presentation to it. But it's really nascent, and it's thanks to the work of PIH, and with over time it has increased. So we have about 8 oncology people in the country. About 3 clinical oncologists and many more into pediatrics and medical. And within the nation, we have about 3 oncology centers, 2 urban and 1 rural. So about the questions I was asked was more about the pressing gaps into education. The first pressing gap in education is essentially what we go through into learning oncology in my country. This is a map of Africa and how things have gone around since 2012. The first oncologist graduated in 2012 from South Africa, and after too many years of hard labor, almost slaving and almost giving up, 2 more Rwandans came from Tanzania in 2018, and we have 3 more into training right now who are completing between this year and the next. And we also have a few people in Egypt doing clinical oncology and expected to finish between 2019 and 2021. So these are the few centers that are known. It might not be comprehensive, but these are the few centers across Africa that have oncology training. It can be really anything, as we've seen with the empath model, that it can be medical oncology, it can be gyne, it can be radiation, it can be clinical oncology, but these are the few centers around. It's not comprehensive. You can think of a country like the Congo, which is the biggest in Africa, that doesn't have any oncology training, and about a few oncologists in the whole country, most of them based in Kinshasa, which is right towards the Atlantic Ocean. And a lot of other countries, mostly on the French-speaking side, do not have any oncology training as of known. So the issues that we go through, and also back home, because we do not have any training, we try to understand the reasons and the way oncology is taught around. And we've found a team of collaborators. We found from medical students' perspectives, essentially about 80 medical students this year, a few years ago, that the most of the common teaching style of oncology is essentially bedside teaching. There is no oncology curriculum, and there is also a need of formal rotation in oncology. That is from a country perspective of a country that does not have any formal training. And the typical pathway in oncology learning for an African like me and a few others in the room has been the Tanzanian way of learning. In 2015, we went to study, Fidel and I, we went to Tanzania, which is pretty much the biggest country in East Africa that has about 60 million population. And it is now considered as a hub of cervical cancer in the world, according to the Global Can data. So it has a lot more of ground that is not covered by any oncology or cancer care at all. And so the thing is that they provide about 3 years of residency training with clinical apprenticeship in clinical oncology, but with core radiation therapy courses. And it has become, over time, a Pan-African clinical oncology training hub with people coming from all over Africa to learn clinical oncology. So the current global oncology partnerships that we've been involved with are mostly the Mass General Hospital Cancer Centers through the Poetic Program, the Mayo Clinic Cancer Center, which is pretty new as of last year, and also the UCSF that has been there for quite a while now. The types of partnership that they have, the UCSF is more of building capacity in research. They have pretty much a large grant, I think, from Fogarty, if I'm not mistaken, that covers a lot of things into oncology. I mean, in terms of radiology, the core oncology discipline, pathology, and so on. And they also started a resident exchange as of last year. MGH has a resident or fellow exchange that started last year, and more are to come in this year. The Mayo Clinic as well has been sending and receiving residents and faculty starting last year. So the way we understand, the partnerships around is more of a win-win situation, mostly from the side of saying the low resource settings have uncommon diseases, condition not met in high-income countries. They might be there, but also we have raw and taped data that is there, that is, not seen and not explored. We also have a high volume of patients that are seen on a daily basis in the clinics, but also a large area of conditions. The high resource settings bring in the infrastructure needed. They also bring in the research capacity that we do not have, and also the funds that we also do not have, and the strength of multidisciplinary setting. This is the image of electricity access in the world. But the reason why I brought this image essentially is to show the way research looks like in the world as well. And sadly, people in the room can also agree that Africa is so untapped, and data going from epidemiology to disease outcome is really unknown out there. And one of the reasons we think of a partnership or starting a partnership is going through a needs assessment to know the gaps around, starting from literature. You'll be amazed that many countries, from the lack of cancer registries, still rely on GlobalCan data. And knowing the gaps, knowing the research gaps, knowing what is unknown from our countries should be the starting point. And from there, from many partnerships that have been established already, grants can start, and established consortiums can be established at points, and also to increase visibility with time and influence clinical practice. There is a saying out there that, evidence hasn't killed anyone, but only kills human ego. So the reason why I'm bringing it in is because we can only change the praxis back in low-income countries by only showing what's lacking and showing the most pertinent evidence out there. So the way we understand NGOs like this one and more is essentially to premiere the work of global oncology by showing the situational gaps in low and middle income countries, setting partnerships between low income countries and high income country settings, depending on common interests, and also pioneering global action in curbing innovatively common personal and infrastructural challenges. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Everybody's excited for the happy hour, I think. Thank you, Achille. Our next speaker will be Thomas Ram, who is a faculty in the Department of Radiation Oncology at the Dr. Ida B. Scudder Cancer Center at Christian Medical College in Vellore, India.
A very good evening to all of you, and I bring greetings from India. And thank you, ICEC, for inviting a member from that part of the world to this first inaugural meet of ICEC. Yes, it's a privilege for me to represent our institution, and coincidentally, we celebrate 100 years of our medical education in this 1918, and the celebration continues. And for those of you who are familiar with the map of India, but we are located in the southernmost state of Tamil Nadu, and I would use the word close to Sri Lanka, and it is in a small town called Vellore. Just to give you a background of our story of where we are today, our capacity building and our partnerships. When this institution the leadership was handed over to the Indian leadership, the vision statement which is established still continues, and it states that CMC Vellore seeks to be a witness to the healing ministry of Christ through excellence in education, service, and research. So all three components of education, service, and research were the thrust which was given way back in the 1900s. Even the mission statement which was drafted, I was surprised to see at that point, they ensured that the partnership was part of our mission. So CMC looks for support and participation in its programs in education, service, outreach, and research from friends and like-minded agencies in India and abroad in a true spirit of partnership. And what CMC stands for, I would like to highlight few things is about value education, and I'll let you know very soon, it's not only subsidized education, but we have a tradition of the students staying along with the teachers in the same campus. So it is by storytelling about why we are delivering this kind of a healthcare, cost-effective healthcare. The student and the teacher stay in the same campus, and in the process, we kind of inculcate some of the values, what we stand for. And we stand for compassionate care and services using appropriate technology, relevant research, and servant leadership, which is highlighted in our motto, not to be ministered unto, but to minister. Partnerships have been a legacy of our institution, and I think what we are today, after 118 years, is because of this thrust of partnerships. Our founders saw that if the medical mission has to continue, we need to train as many as Indians as possible. So it was very early in the 1900s, one of the first nursing schools in India was established. And in 1918, the medical school was established. And coincidentally, this medical school was meant only for women. It was only in 1947 the men were permitted to train in the medical school. And right from the establishment, CMC has proactively engaged with like-minded organizations and individuals. So this is just to give you a glimpse of our past. This is a story about a family called Scudder family who was from North America, and it's almost 200 years since that family has been doing medical missions in Asia and Africa. And what you see on the right is like an ox cart, and along with that is a founder, Dr. Ida Scudder. And on the left is a picture when she was inspired to go and come training. She was one of the first few graduating student from, initially she joined in Pennsylvania, then she came to Cornell, and then she graduated in 1900, and then she came back to India to start this healthcare facility. And whatever was the fastest mode of transport available there, she used it, and she used to go for the outreach clinics in this ox cart. And today, we have grown. The story of 118 years of partnership, capacity building. We are now a not-for-profit organization, 2,800-bed multi-specialty tertiary care hospital, more than 180 departments, 95 wards, and many operating rooms, and we see close to 2.6 million patients annually. We have 175 education programs, and we train 1,600 students per year. And we have close to 9,000 staff, they were growing. And on an average day, we see about 8,000 patients. per day, and because we are not able to manage in this campus, we are developing 2 new sites nearby. One is on a 100-acre campus, which is more like a specialty oriented, of about close to 2 million square feet, 1,500 beds, and another nearby campus on 600 acres, which is more like an educational campus focusing on secondary level of healthcare rather than a tertiary level of healthcare. This is a typical scene, not waiting for a baseball or a basketball game, but waiting for the queue for the blood tests or to see the doctor in the current campus, what we have. This is one of the future campuses which should be operational by the middle of next year. This is a 2 million square feet facility, and we are developing a state-of-the-art trauma center because on the highway from Chennai to our town over there, and also oncology services are coming up in this campus. So what are the key things our institution stands for? We strongly believe in affordable education as a service to the society. If we need to train healthcare professionals who will go out and look after the smaller centers in the country, we need to make the education affordable. And for that, it is been a non-negotiable of our institution that we heavily subsidize education. So for example, for training a medical student, we charge close to $50 annually. For a postgraduate resident training, maybe it's just roughly around $10. And on top of that, we give a lot of subsidies in our patient's care, and in our education subsidies, what we have, which almost close to around $30 million. So a lot of financial analysts came and predicted doom, that the way you're doing subsidies, you're going to shut down because you don't have government funding and you're trying to run the institution on your own resources. So one of the key formula is you see large volume or high volume services which we provide in the institution, and with lean staff, lean resources, you give high volume services, and that brings in the surplus which is used to subsidize education and services for the patient. And the idea is to train committed, compassionate healthcare professionals who will have lifetime commitment to serve in the areas of need. This is one word which is coined by some of the finance analysts. When they saw that we're giving so much of charity, they said you'll shut down in 10 years' time. And when they came back, based on their prediction, it was hardly 10% of the projected value. And then they realized that because of this high volume turnover, what we were doing, what on the left, what you see is an optimal resource situation in the main hospital, where you have one of the latest incubators using in a neonatal unit. But we also have outreach activities in nearby places. And what was locally available there, for example, if you see on the right, they made it like an umbrella out of a cage and using a sheet over it and hanging a bulb over it, which did the job of an incubator. So this is our idea, is whatever is available locally, we try to optimize that and do the best what we can in those resources. We have several public health initiatives. We have training programs where we gradually expose them to the community locally and also nationwide. And also we give various training programs at the community health providers. We have visitors locally from the nation, and also globally we have a lot of visitors. At a given time, we have around 40 visitors in the campus. And we have services in the outreach clinic in and around Vellore. And there are two different models. The one is the community health, which focuses mainly on the community health and looks after prevention and vaccination. The next model is more of a rural unit for social affairs, health and social affairs. So along with the health, you develop some social beneficial activities, like you train them in stitching, tailoring, or carpentry, so that they bring in some revenue and it directly improves the health of that community. And then we have a lot of mission outreach activity in our institution. And we have a strong emphasis on research, and also we trained our physicians in healthcare administration. There's another thing is the whole operations are managed by clinicians. We don't have MBAs who take the executive decisions. So I may say that also is one of the cost-saving model what has been used in an institution. We have a national presence with the government. We have, and the key strategies what we follow is individual capacity building, training our staff, the organizational capacity building, the community capacity building, and sustainable development. And one of the key things what we follow is social justice or distributive justice in admission process, which I may not be able to share now at over a cup of coffee or in the evening. I can share what we do to ensure that we get people from the underserved areas, they get an equal opportunity to train in an institution so that they can go back to that place. Then we have other strategies like training the trainer, critical thinking and research, and also is very important is a philosophy is we believe on propagation of values rather than self-promotion in our partnerships. And we encourage faculty to be the ambassadors for networking and collaboration. This is a network of our centers in the country, about 185, from which I was telling we train them and send to all over the country. This is a network we have in USA. We have like-minded partners in various parts of USA and of the rest of the world and also nationally. And this is a list of various partners we have, which I've shown on the map. And Cornell continues to be our partner from where a founder had come out. And on the top, Tufts University is one of our key and the most, I would say, strong partner for the past 50 years. And we, in various areas of collaboration, we have networked with them. And then the latest one to add is Medical College Wisconsin, and we got networked through Longo in the department. We have a foundation in New York, Weller Foundation, who coordinates a lot of these partnerships through various stakeholders in the United States. And then we have Friends of Weller. We have several global health initiatives encouraging faculty and students to go out to various parts of the world and have a brief exposure. And we have developed a blended learning model, not only for within the country, but for some areas in Africa through a distance education initiative, which has been strengthening over the past several years. These are the centers internationally. And also recently we have ventured into mission to South Sudan through some of our alumnus of our institution. Yeah, we still face challenges in sustaining the partnerships, understanding the work culture, and the economic resources to sustain these partnerships. And we have a lot of opportunities for building a global radiation oncology career through our partnerships, what we have, and we send our residents and we invite some residents who can come and do short-term observership with us. So let me summarize where CMC's vision and mission mandates the partnerships with like-minded institutions. And CMC has an affirmative policy of enabling and encouraging mutually beneficial networking. We have a strong global alumni network, Friends of Weller, who make a major role in enabling these partnerships. And we have, I would say, a discipline of constantly reassessing, re-examining, and changing, if we need to, on what we are headed to. So this is a chapel in our campus, which is not only central physically, but symbolically, which inspires us to look at healthcare with I would say, a lens of healing ministry. So thank you for your kind attention. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. We will conclude our panels with bringing Dr. Joel Yarney back up to the stage.
So it has been a long day. I'm sure most of us are tired. And my surname, Yarni, starts with Y. So I find myself being the last to be interviewed at most meetings, and even medical school. You go for oral examinations, I'm the last one. And today too, I find myself to be the last presenter. So we'll make it snappy. So capacity building, the process by which individuals, organizations obtain, improve, and retain skills, knowledge, tools, equipment, and other resources needed to do their jobs competently to a greater capacity. So the important words are obtaining, improving, and retaining skills knowledge. So as we form partnerships, this should be the underlying objective. And skills acquisition can be done through coaching, teaching, knowledge acquisition, support, and leads to development. Now, partnerships are effective through collaboration. And in some other slides that I saw, this partnership must include, for it to be successful, there must be trust, there must be teamwork, and so on. It's a comment I would like to make regarding dealing with Africa. I have a resident at Moffitt, so now we are preparing an abstract to present at ASCO. And he writes, and a study between Moffitt and Ghana, he writes, African patients are likely to do so. I said, Francis, when did you start referring to us as African patients? I think that we expect to be called Ghanaian. If you go to Kenya, you must say Kenya. Africa is big and there's wide variation, resources and human capacity. For instance, if the labs, in a country, even in Ghana, between the north and the south, there will be wide variations. What you may not obtain in the middle may be obtainable in the south. So if you generalize that, say, Ghana or Africa doesn't have this, maybe South Africa has it. So in these collaborations, there should be trust, there should be respect. This should be there before the partnerships will be effective. I think one of the speakers defined this. I want to say that non-communicable disease and cancer is so important that it is mentioned in the Sustainable Development Goals. I think one of the presenters also mentioned that. Now, what is the basis for this partnership? Ranking of cancer in the Western world as a cause of death is about the first. But for most developing countries in Africa, it's between the 5th and 10th as a cause of death. What are the common cancers? I will make some inferences from these slides, my slides that are coming. As prostate mainly, both in the West and then in developing countries. For women, it's mainly breast in Africa and also in developed world, followed by cervix in some parts of Africa. This slide is based on data from GlobalCan 2018. I'd like you to take note of the wide difference between incidence and mortality. Incidence and mortality for high human development index countries, and very little difference for Africa, which means that if you develop cancer in Africa, the chances that you die from it is quite high compared to other parts of the world. So why the difference? Why do we have such a difference? Partnership, the fact that we have prostate cancer in Africa as the #1, prostate cancer in the West as #1, already provides a platform for partnerships and collaboration. But again, the differences also provides a platform for collaboration. For instance, diseases that are not too common in the West but ought to be studied are best studied in Africa. Cervical cancer, it is true, there are not too many in the Western world, but still you see cases. So if you want to do a study or a trial on cervical cancer, I think the accrual rate will be faster if you did it in low and middle income countries. That are the goals of cancer treatment. I'm sure we know all this. What I wanted to point out was that no country has achieved 100% in cancer care. People are still dying from cancer. And there's varying incidence of cancer and success at management. So the fact that it's not 100% means still there's opportunity for more research. And that research can be done through collaboration and partnerships, as I've demonstrated. What accounts for these differences? This is a question of life expectancy, lifestyle, environmental exposure, or the biology or quality of health services. Some say, in the biology, for instance, some say breast cancer is more aggressive in patients in Africa. Is it true? If you look at the age distribution, you find that the peak age at incidence of breast cancer is 40 to 50 in most parts of Africa, because life expectancy is low. If life expectancy is low, you can't have patients in the 60s and 70s. And we all know that breast cancer is more aggressive in young patients, right? Triple negative breast cancer is found in young patients. So is it really because we have a young population and therefore more aggressive cancer, or inherently it's they're aggressive, or even prostate cancer? You know, the cancers transform over time. So if you are diagnosing, I'm sure there was a previous speaker in Nigeria, and colorectal cancer. If you are diagnosing mostly colorectal cancer in metastasis, by all means, the disease has transformed. So if it had been picked up earlier, probably it would have been the same as what you would have found elsewhere. So is it inherently aggressive, or it's because you are diagnosing it late? These are all questions that we can research on. What are the types of cooperation? You can have research, you can have attachments for education, which can be long-term or short-term. It can be at the level of the residents, or it can be at the level of qualified personnel, staff. It can be equipment or technology transfer that is achieved in the process of the partnership or the research. But there are a number of considerations. Some of them have been alluded to already by previous speakers, like language issues. You're doing research or teaching, you have to make sure that language of instruction of whatever partnership there is common. But in Africa, most, like in Ghana, most people can speak English. So that provides, usually that is not a barrier. Before you engage in a partnership, you may need to formalize the agreement. And that often means going through not only the department, but going through the university. That may take some time. Or you're going to form partnerships with just the individual department. These are questions that we need to answer before we embark on this partnership. Are the students or the beneficiaries going to register with the Medical and Dental Council? That takes a while. When they get back home, is it going to be recognized? There have been instances where people have gone for training, and after that they call themselves maybe a certain title, they go back home, they don't have any certificate to present, and they are not recognized. Is it going to be actual practice or just observation? Because usually when you go to a center and you are not allowed to, you just observe and you don't participate. You don't come back with the required skills. So these are considerations that are very important in the partnership and apply also to educational partnerships. In collaborating, you have to think about the installed capacity. Is it tied to a project so that when the project, the lifetime of the project ends, then it means the partnership just ends. All these determinations have to be made. What is the distribution of cancers, the caseload, because you are sending someone, you're going to train, if you are only seeing, let's say, a few cases, is it worth sending the student there? You have to consider the caseload and the distribution of cancers when you are sending people or in partnerships. We have had a number of partnerships. We've had, there was a Ghanaian at Mayo, Professor AJ. We did a study on neoadjuvant chemotherapy, very successful collaboration. Led to one of our oncology nurses being trained in Mayo for a while, and also came down to do some training. But there was a deficiency at the time. We were not doing receptor studies, so we couldn't, it was just limited to an abstract. We couldn't publish the paper very well. But then at least it led to some medication. We do prostate brachytherapy. So far, we've done about 180 patients. That was through a collaboration with BAT Brachytherapy on-site training. And they asked us to perform, and over, I think there were about 3 or 4 visits. And the last one, they asked us to do it ourselves under observation. And they thought that we had learned the rules, so they certified us. You see, that's an example of a partnership that has worked very well, and we continue to do the brachytherapy for prostate cancer. We've also had a partnership with Louise Britton from, I think she's retired now, NCI. It's a clinical epidemiology research partnership. That's led to about 3 publications, but there were funding issues, but eventually we surmounted all these problems. So issues with specimen transfer and legislation regarding biopsy transfer. I think in the near future, it will be very difficult even to transfer specimens across country. So I think that we have to move into the era of equipping the countries to be able to perform the tests locally. We've also had partnerships with Moffitt. There have been 1-month attachment of residents. They come to Accra, Ghana for about a month or 2. We've had visiting oncologists come to Ghana from Moffitt to do some didactic teaching, molecular biology, radiobiology. We've had collaborative research in prostate cancer, cervical cancer with Moffitt. And also PMH as well has resulted in a publication in the Red Journal. And we had a more elaborate one. The person who did this is here, Professor Erica Wong is sitting in the audience. It was very beneficial. 1-year duration through telehealth. And residents and even staff learned quite a lot. We started by engaging a medical school and doing all the agreements, and it worked very well. These are the topics that were rendered by staff from the PMH, and residents benefited from it quite a lot. Very good partnership. And recently, there was a meeting in Accra to try and harmonize curricula for training of clinical oncologists in Africa. So we looked at the entry requirements, duration, the subjects studied, and came out with some conclusions, chief of which I've listed here, with an emphasis on competencies and skills, in addition to the didactic teaching, multidisciplinary approach to patient management, and then the disciplines study, pathology, radiobiology, and so on. This is the center, the Radiotherapy Center in Accra. And this is the Elena we are about commissioning. In fact, they started commissioning it. So I'm sure by next month we'll start using it. Those of us who haven't seen a cobalt machine before, oh, this is a cobalt machine. Some people come to Accra, when they see the cobalt machine, we say, like, what we've heard about it, we thought it looked very different. Looked like a monster. Yeah, but it just looks like the Linac. It has advantages and disadvantages. I don't want to mention the countries, but there are countries where they have Linux, but it's been down for a long time. So if you have both, this one works like a horse. And very simple, and it can be repaired easily. So with the power fluctuations, in fact, most of our Linux, we have to add automatic voltage regulator to make sure that voltage is stabilized. It's more complex than we think for us. So it's useful for us to have both so that our downtime is reduced. So this is our brachytherapy suite, and you can see the ultrasound images and the tumor volumes that are being drawn. This is someone from Moffitt giving a lecture through the partnership. The one in the center is the provost of the College of Medicine. We had a visit from Moffitt staff. And this is our new University of Ghana Medical Center, quite modern. We started using it about just 3 months back. Very, very modern. This theater, at the time that I took the pictures, was yet to be used. You can see all the rubber surrounding the equipment. So there's opportunity for collaborative research where the capacity is not enough. I think it can be built, and there must be mutual respect for skills acquisition, knowledge transfer. Thank you. End of.
Thank you, Dr. Yarni, and I'll ask you to take a seat up here, and I'll invite our 4 other panelists to the front. We have a good chunk of time for questions, which I think is the most exciting part of this meeting. So we'll get everyone settled up here, and I'm going to take the first question, but then I'm going to throw it out to the audience for the remainder of the time. So while we're finalizing the tech here, I'm going to throw out my first question. I think we've highlighted many examples of successful partnerships, and we've outlined the key principles to developing viable partnerships. Would any of you be willing to share examples of ineffective partnerships or partnerships that have been detrimental to your work? You can keep it anonymous, but just
sure. I'm happy to give a couple examples. A couple of partnerships that I've been a part of or sort of been on the side of that did not work very well. One was about 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. We came up with a great plan in a country I was working in. This is before I was even doing cancer work, about task shifting for surgery, because in countries with a couple general surgeons, you need to have other people doing surgery. There's no other way to get it done. We came up with a fantastic training program. A couple of local surgeons were behind it, and there was, the whole thing fell apart for unknown reasons. There was something in the Ministry of Health that was blocking this. I don't know why. Now there's a group that's in, this was back in Sierra Leone, there's now a group that's doing it now. So I like to think maybe that us talking about it 8, 10 years ago had some positive effect. But we spent a number of years, had this whole program, everything was all set up, and the whole thing just fell apart. So there was something that I don't understand that was working against us. Even my Sierra Leonean colleagues didn't understand exactly what the barrier was, but there was a barrier higher up that we never understood. And all those couple of years, we failed to even start the program.
Any other insights from failures that you've experienced in collaborating with international partners?
Ours was a collaboration to set up prostate brachytherapy, and there was an international partner who was going to work with us as well as an institution in South Africa, and we set out. South Africa was going to be the first center. The South African center was going to be the first center to be trained, and then they would then move on to train us with the strengths that they would have built in the South African institution. And so we went there for the first round of training, if I may put it that way, and we spent some days there. That was the first ever physical interaction that we're going to have all three centers together. And I think there were issues in the South African institution that actually led to that experience. The training could not be completed, and therefore, and then we thought that now, okay, maybe we could attempt from our side, but I think the whole exercise was aborted. It was infrastructural as well as administrative issues that we faced. So we're still open for partnerships. Prostate brachytherapy.
Yeah, while some of you have shared some of the challenges you had with your international collaboration, and as I showed on a slide, we have extensive national networking. And whenever we engage in one of our partner institutions in some kind of capacity building, we expect some kind of good practices in the governance, good practices in the administration, and also due diligence in the finances of that. So that is one of the key thing. What we have is like a checkpoint, and occasionally we have a challenge where it is not fulfilling some of the minimum standards of good practices in these areas. Then we had to kind of pull off from that partnership which we intended to develop. That is one thing which I like to share. There's one more thing which we look into when we engage in some kind of a partnership, especially in a local network.
Yeah, one of the slides that I showed can be like a tick box. If one of the items shown there is not satisfied, it's likely that you will not succeed. For instance, the agreements and legislation regarding these partnerships. If somebody from the university or from the Ministry of Health has to sign and refuses to do so, I mean, it will not work. Or if the installed capacity, the minimum requirements are not met, it will not be successful. There are little things that has to be looked at. It may appear very simple in your part of the world, but in ours, sometimes something that should take about a month will take about 6 months, right? If you want to send someone for education, let's say in South Africa initially, residents that were sent there, many people have benefited from it, but in the early days post-apartheid, you were going to be educated, but you were not going to be given a certificate, even though you will go through the same training as their residents. And there were issues with medical and dental council and the such. So all these issues must be considered and work that before you engage in the partnership.
So the experience has been more on the side of faculty not understanding, the partnerships. Most of the partnerships that we were able to start off were started when we were residents, and the power of residents collaboration overseas and people who know each other start trying to set up something has actually earned a lot of initiatives to the Ocean Road Cancer Institute where I trained, and many of these of these initiatives are not first understood by the people and the faculty at large. And the issues that were there, I remember one particular initiative was to bring Prono systems. Prono systems works like eContour for contouring learning. And one of the things that you have to do as a partnering institution is to load up a case. And the case that were asked, were demanded from us was a cervical cancer case. And I remember going to my academic faculty, and she actually told me that she cannot agree, she doesn't agree with the whole setting, and she doesn't want us to be in it because it will be like data coming from us to them, and they don't know what that data is going to do. So it hasn't failed, it's coming up, but what I'm trying to highlight is more of people here who have residents, people here who are in the faculty, to really have, to really give much more emphasis, and also to encourage, the resident initiatives around, and that will shape either their global oncology path, into an academic career, so to speak, but also it exposes many of the people from low-income countries to the best of care in cancer.
And I'd like to open up questions to the audience. If people just want to stand by the mics, or we can walk around and give people microphones, or a number of questions. So,
mine will go to Yanni and Drovi. I've seen many of the partnerships between high-income countries and low-income countries being mostly initiated by high-income countries. And this brings, to me, I've seen, the ones that I've seen failing is because of that. So the initiatives from high-income countries, not understandable by the low-income countries, and the push is more from the high-income countries. And there is no, the enthusiasm from the low-income countries. So two of you who have been in this for a long time, that's why I'm asking you as our seniors, in your experiences, what really hinders us to initiate partnerships from low-income countries and wait for people from high-income countries to come and tell us, you have a problem here and we want to solve it for you, or together with you?
I think I sort of touched on that in my mind, although I sort of brushed through it very quickly of who sets the agenda. It is very important that whatever it is, the collaboration should actually include setting the agenda. Who initiates what may not be as important as that particular point of then setting the agenda, because ideas should flow from both sides. And then now when that idea is agreed upon, and then the execution of it has to be agreed also by both sides, and address common priorities, that, so that, whatever results come out of that will be beneficial both ways. I think our needs, sometimes the needs of the two sides may be slightly different, or even the way that things are perceived. I remember there was, one study that we worked on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, where there was a protocol that was drafted outside, Africa. It was supposed to be a multi-center clinical trial. It was drafted outside of Africa. And then when it came, we looked at it, we went for a protocol meeting and we examined it. We found that actually there were a lot of queries, but it was a very good learning experience for me in particular, because going through it step by step, and then we made a lot of revisions, which took quite a long time, and perhaps maybe that was a loss in terms of resources, time, financial, and everything, because now we had to sort of like start, not on a clean slate and try to perfect something that is not quite there. So when it happens like that, it's probably not the ideal way of doing it, rather than, setting everyone, on the same table right from the start. So when eventually we came up with something that was very reasonable, that was doable, and that satisfied the expectations of both sides. Although still there were issues with accrual and things like that, but there is a lot that we learned from that. So the agenda eventually was set, and it was agreeable, and so forth and so on. But that was a learning experience.
I'd like to comment on your question. Most of the time, it's mutually beneficial, and their research questions may have lingered for a long time, but because of because of the way we practice, if you are seeing patients, you are overburdened. Your clinic ends at 5, so your time for research is so little. So a lot of times you are unable to do research. It demands time. I'll give you an example. Horia is here. We've treated cancer of the cervix patients for a long time. We've always wanted to do outcomes research, to at least have a look. You look at how well you have been doing, but we never got the time to do it because you are overburdened. So when Horia from PMH visited and we discussed it, and he said, "Oh, this one I can do it." Immediately, we partnered, and it was done. Of course, we use a statistician at PMH and so on, you see. So a lot of times it's mutual. The other thing is that the past few years, genomic studies have become fashionable. That is the in thing now. If you did research there, it means you are on top. So the diversity, having studied patients here, the logical thing was to come to Africa, study patients there. And usually if there's specimen transfer, usually people like it more. If there's not going to be any specimen transfer, some of the researchers are not interested in partnering at all. So like many things, you have fashion in clothing, you have fashion in oncology as well. That was the in thing. So specimen transfer, so then you collaborate.
We'll go to a question over there. Dr. Martin?
Thanks, Mac. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. Achille, I think your slides certainly gave us a stark reminder of that grotesque chasm between incidence and capability on the continent of Africa. Can each of you share a couple of concrete things that we could do to work with you to be able to improve and strengthen oncology capabilities in your countries? Thank you.
There's a cancer control continuum. And in my opinion, our biggest challenge is late presentation. That is the biggest challenge. If we are able to have our patients early, the outcomes will not be too different. As I speak, we are doing comparison between CA cervix patients treated at Moffitt and those treated in Accra. For the early stages, stage 1 and even up to 2B, the outcomes are the same. But when you get to stage 3 and so on, then we start departing. So I think what will influence outcomes most is early presentation. And for that, I don't think that partnerships will help too much. I think it's something that we have to do ourselves for the lead presentation. When it comes to treatment, then I think that there's a lot that we can learn. We can't reinvent the wheel. There's a lot that has been done already. So then the partnerships are relevant. So screening, for instance, we can also learn from it. So early detection, screening, mostly is public health, and I think that our governments need to work on it. Treatment, partnerships. Even palliation, there can be partnerships for better outcomes.
Building on Dr. Joel has just said, there seems to be one model that has been working around the continent. I speak at least from the perspective of Rwanda, Tanzania, and a few other countries in Africa. If you don't come from the standpoint of, I'm the fund giver, I dictate what happens, let the people set their priorities because they know, and at the end of the day, fund their priorities. Because if people fund their own priorities, if people have set their own priorities, I have a strong belief that at the end of the day, they have a certain task or moral responsibility to go on and work according to what they have set as priorities. So that goes with settings like radiation therapy access, prevention, care, and so on. It is really multidisciplinary. It goes through it is really multisectorial as well, but it goes really deep to what people believe are their largest gaps, pressing gaps, and mostly their own priorities. And you'll be amazed that things that we have as the most pressing gap is different from what Zimbabwe has, or what Ghana has, or what India has. Because the tendency to take Africa as one country or one thing has gone beyond the generalization into having people's interests from, let's say, disease sites interest, let's say esophageal cancer, prostate cancer, and coming over with the funds, to fund whatever interest is there, that is genetics, that is disease outcomes, and so on. And you'll find out that, that is not definitely the most, pressing thing, but rather people setting themselves their own priorities, so to speak.
I can speak for ICEC, my colleague in Nigeria. So pretend I'm ICEC, because I know he would answer this question. I think there's two things that we found to try and improve cancer care in Nigeria specifically within our group. So one is very small pilot grants, because we give out two $5,000 pilot grants within our consortium each year. What that allows is junior faculty who have questions to try and get some data going, because setting the agenda is important, but if you have no evidence at all, it's hard to even talk about an agenda. So helping people get a grant early on with a very small amount of money to generate a 100-patient study. The one I showed, Laide Gundaran showed that actually it's not patients where the problem is. In his area of Nigeria, patients are accessing the healthcare system with breast masses, and it takes on average 6 to 9 months to move forward. So it's actually much more of a community health worker problem, community-based problem on the medical side, not patient education problem. The women are presenting. So small grant like that now lets us say, well, let's make this a bigger project now that you've identified this. Second thing is, I'm a surgeon, so I'm biased, but surgery is really the cornerstone of cancer care for solid tumors. In a country like Nigeria, there are no medical oncologists. There's some radiation oncologists who treat patients with chemotherapy. There's very few medical oncologists. So in most institutions, you present to a surgeon with stage 4 breast cancer, they do your biopsy, they write you for all your chemotherapy, they write for all your palliative care, they do everything. There's a role to try and figure out how can you improve surgical care for cancer patients. And this is the start of a discussion. I don't have an answer for this. We've been brainstorming about this for a while. Is it some 3-month in-country program for surgeons that are already practicing on how to improve their knowledge of basic cancer care? Because if you did cervical cancer, prostate cancer, breast cancer, gastric cancer, colon cancer in Nigeria, for instance, that handles the large majority of cancer patients. Is it a 1 year long thing? Is it a 2 week thing? I don't have an answer for it, but I think how to improve the quality of surgical care and the knowledge of the general surgeon or the general gynecologist or the general urologist who treats the majority of patients is a huge barrier that we need to try and figure out an answer to.
Yeah, I'll just share a few thoughts. Most of you have shared. What comes to my mind, apart from what you have told, is one of the key areas which I can think of is access to the oncology literature. And I know that there are several government-funded institutions where the access is, I would say, near optimal, because there are mechanisms to fund whatever is the current literature available all over the world. But there are many more centers or institutions where still accessing the, I would say, the literature or whatever is journals available, it is still at the premium cost. So that is one key area which comes to my mind. If we want to bring into equity, into access to oncological knowledge database, we need to look at some kind of a mechanism where it should be made accessible to most of the practicing oncologists, I would say all over the world, especially in the underserved areas. The other thing which comes to my mind is about research capacity building, as most of you have shared. I mean, one of the weaknesses is the high volume of clinical care which you get drowned into in some of these places, and the layers of, I would say, support to develop effective research program, which we see in the high-income countries. That is always I would say, issue of envy for most of us. So the research capacity building by identifying mutual partners, I would say, who would show commitment, I would say long-term commitment to do something effectively. That is another area where we need to develop some mechanism. And also, as far as innovations which are concerned, a lot of people have been talking about innovations, and I like your idea about point of care research, what we have been doing. And yeah, innovations will probably get triggered when there is a mutual exchange of people who are into doing innovations by exactly visiting the ground reality, what is happening. And this is a typical example what he has shown about using the urine test for colorectal cancers, because I worked in a central part of India where if you go and say that let us do a pap smear in all the women, I'm in trouble. Because of some cultural issues, you can't suddenly say let's call all the women and do pap smear over there. So these are the, and urine test, I would say, even for a cervical cancer is going to be a very acceptable option in this situation. So I would say people who are interested in innovative I would say screening or diagnostic tools, to go and see in ground reality and make relevant tools available to these kind of places.
And there's a difference between, I know from America, North America, when you come to Africa and you engage oncologists, as you said, that Africa has mainly radiation oncology is true, but the training of oncologists in Africa is not like what happens in North Africa. The training is very, very different. In your training, you would be trained to give chemotherapy as well. So maybe it's a misnomer, it's a terminology. So it must not be assumed that someone calls himself radiation oncologist in Africa, it means he doesn't have any experience in medical oncology. Most people have done medical oncology as part of their training. It's more of clinical.
Radiation oncologists and medical oncologists, yes. In fact, you wear two hats. I know you wear two hats. Yeah.
Perspective.
I have to say that, that's a huge question, because I think there's a lot that needs to be done. And the question is really, where do you begin? Right, we've spoken about prevention being cornerstone, but for me, I treat, and I still think that it is important that cancer treatment is given the boost, and the things that really the most important is the standard and the quality of treatment that we're giving to our patients. So are we really you know, sometimes we may be treating ourselves if we are doing things suboptimally, and then we count the numbers and say, oh, through my center, so many patients come through every year, but what standard of treatment are we giving? You know, here we're talking about, you know, quality assurance issues, and the level of knowledge of the, you know, looking at cancer in a multidisciplinary way. The level of care that the patient is getting at every particular point. So the surgery, there is other things that come in. And then the team, the management team itself, being in radiation, you know, being the oncologist there, it's not just about me. There is the medical physicist, there is the RTT, there is the oncology nurse. What are the strengths that we have, and where can we actually strengthen? For my center, I can say that, you know, definitely medical physics, we probably would need a very big boost, you know, just to make sure that, why? So that we can make sure that we can actually advance our treatment techniques and do more for our patients than what we're doing right now. So introduction of new treatment techniques will require that medical physics strength. It will also require, you know, perhaps maybe small upgrades of equipment, you know, software. Right now we're doing 3D CRT. We want to transition to IMRT. The machines are capable. And then for the other people like oncologists and RTTs, yes, they will need training as well, but it's not, why I singled out the medical physicists is because perhaps maybe they are the ones who would probably need more training than the other members of the team for them to, or more support rather, more support. So this is something that can be done even remotely. I would like to believe, if there are medical physicists here, they might correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that, you know, such support can even be done remotely. You don't need somebody to be physically there. So all those things. And then of course the clinical trials are very important. Research is very important. And it becomes also part of the training of our younger and up and coming oncologists. If they could have opportunities to visit other centers, get exposed and get stronger, you know, foundation in their clinical practice as well as research, which really I feel goes hand in hand. So it's a lot. The list is endless.
Yeah, so I think that's a wonderful question to close the meeting on. Although Harmer, one of our senior mentors, has his hand up there. So Harmer, if you have a quick question, then we'll.
This is really quick. Does any of the panel or anybody in the room know of a low-income country that has issued an RFP for which multiple high-income countries have responded?
Zero.
Well, that may get to the problem where the high-income country generated proposal has failed. And it might be worth our consideration for how do we help low-income countries issue RFPs to which high-income countries can respond.
Yeah, oftentimes it's part of legislation that it has to come from within.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, so I don't think we can do anything about it, but you can partner. Example is that we've had partnering between, companies. For instance, Varian will partner with a local supplier to produce a good to answer to the RFP. So it's done.
Yeah. Well, you know, and we hope that meetings like this can be incubators for all of us to collaborate in a safe space, as we used earlier in the meeting, to generate these ideas and work together. To close the first day, I just want to return to one of the themes from earlier this morning, and that's gratitude. We're very grateful for your participation and the participation of all of our panelists today. They gave us a lot to reflect upon, and I hope that we continue these conversations into the cocktail hour. Now, the one thing that is between everybody and a happy hour cocktail is a photo. So I'm just going to invite everybody that would like to participate up to the front of the room. The panelists can actually stay as is. Maybe Peter, I'll ask you to stand behind because you're tall. And just come in, we'll take a photo, and then we'll enjoy in a more relaxed setting for the rest of the evening.